Ever watched a movie with like a crack team of rescuers, going into a disaster zone?
Yeah.
They have to rely on each other to make these, life or death decisions.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're talking about today. But we're adding a twist.
Okay.
What if one of those rescuers was a robot?
It's a question researchers are actually asking more and more as robots become increasingly sophisticated,
Right.
And we're going to dive into a 2024 study from Yadav and Mehta at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Yeah.
It specifically looks at trust dynamics in these multi-human robot teams.
Multi-human robot teams.
Yeah, or MHRTs as they're called.
MHRTs.
Especially in these high-stakes search and rescue situations.
So they didn't just want to know if we trust robots.
Right.
But how having a robot on the team changes the whole team dynamic, even the trust between the human members.
Yeah, that's the interesting part.
That's fascinating.
To study this, they used a virtual simulation of a search and rescue mission.
Oh, wow.
Almost like a video game, but for science. They put together these teams of 3 and tasked them with finding victims in a simulated burning building.
Oh, so high stakes.
Yeah. Each team had a mission specialist and a safety officer,
Okay.
both always humans.
Got it.
And then a navigator, which could be either a human or a robot, depending on the scenario.
So you have your classic all-human team.
Yeah.
But then they add in a robot to the mix.
They do.
And they actually had 2 versions of the robot navigator, right?
That's right.
One that was super reliable.
Yeah, basically acting like a perfect human teammate.
And another that was programmed to make mistakes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes.
They wanted to see how these different levels of robot reliability would impact, both the individual trust in the robot and the overall trust and performance of the team.
This is where things get really interesting.
This is where it gets good.
You'd think in a life or death situation, people would trust a robot more.
Right.
That's always right.
You would think.
You'd think you'd want to go with the sure thing. But the study found something kind of unexpected.
Yeah.
Even when the robot was flawless, people still had more trust in a human navigator.
It seems like we have this natural inclination to trust humans more than machines.
Yeah.
Even when the evidence suggests the machine might be more capable.
Why do you think that is?
Well, we're social creatures, right?
Yeah.
Wired to connect, empathize with other humans.
Yeah.
There's this shared understanding and instinct that's really hard to replicate with artificial intelligence, even a very advanced one.
I think, plus we all have those experiences with technology letting us down at the worst possible moment.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
I know I've had my share of frozen computer screens and spinning wheels.
Right.
So maybe there's a bit of that, like, what if it crashes? Anxiety in the back of our minds, even if the robot has like a perfect track record.
Right. Even if it's never messed up before, you're like, yeah, but what if now?
Exactly. And that anxiety was actually reflected in the data.
Oh, wow.
They used a 7-point scale to measure trust. And the human navigator consistently scored higher.
Really?
Even when the robot navigator was performing flawlessly.
Even when it was perfect.
Perfect.
That's so interesting.
It is.
But here's the real head scratcher.
Okay, I'm ready.
The teams with the unreliable robot navigator actually performed better.
What?
They found more victims.
How could that be?
Why would that be?
It seems that having this less than perfect teammate,
Okay.
even a robotic one, forced the human team members to step up their game.
So they had to work harder, basically.
Yeah, they had to adapt to the robot's inconsistencies.
They couldn't just be complacent.
Right. They couldn't just blindly follow its lead.
So it's like that old saying,
What's that?
necessity is the mother of invention.
Oh, yeah.
They couldn't afford to be complacent, so they became more proactive.
Exactly. The researchers observed that these teams were more likely to explore the environment independently,
Oh.
double-checking the robot's guidance and coming up with their own strategies.
So they were less reliant on the robot.
They were relying more on their own skills and judgment,
Interesting.
treating the robot's input as more of a suggestion than a command.
Huh. Almost like having a teammate who means well.
Yeah.
But needs a little extra
A
supervision.
little extra help.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes you think about our own experiences with teams, right?
Exactly.
Have you ever been in a situation where having a less than reliable teammate actually pushed you to perform better?
Oh, all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Sometimes limitations, whether in a teammate or in a tool, force us to get creative,
Yeah.
to find workarounds, and ultimately to develop new skills
Right.
and approaches we might not have otherwise.
You learn how to do it yourself.
It can be frustrating in the moment,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
but it can also be incredibly valuable in the long run.
So while the unreliable robot might not have scored high on those individual trust ratings,
Right.
it seems like it might have inadvertently boosted the team's overall performance.
Yeah.
What about the team dynamics?
Okay.
Did working with a less reliable robot impact the overall sense of trust within the team?
That's where it gets really interesting, and that's what we'll be unpacking in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about how people tend to trust those human navigators more,
Right.
even when the robot is perfectly reliable.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen how an unreliable robot can actually lead to better team performance.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive.
Totally counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But what about the overall team trust?
Okay.
How did having a robot teammate, reliable or not, affect the team's sense of cohesion and trust in each other?
Well, the study actually measured team trust in two ways.
Okay.
First, they had participants rate their trust in the team as a whole after each trial.
Got it.
And second, they used a more detailed questionnaire at the end of each condition to kind of dig deeper into those dynamics.
Okay, let's unpack those nuances.
Okay.
What did they discover about team trust in the different scenarios?
Well, while individual trust in the robot was lower, as we discussed, the overall team trust remained high when the robot was reliable.
Oh, interesting.
It was only when the robot became unreliable that the overall team trust began to decline.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It suggests that there's a difference between trusting a specific teammate and trusting the team as a whole.
It does.
It's almost like even if you have one teammate you're not 100% sure of,
Right.
you can still have faith in the team's ability to get the job done.
Yeah, and this points to the complexity of trust and teamwork. It's not just a one-to-one relationship,
Right.
but a multidimensional phenomenon that involves individual perceptions, shared experiences, and the belief in the team's collective competence.
And thinking about those different team compositions, they all had a mission specialist and a safety officer
Right.
who were always human.
Uh-huh.
Only that navigator role switched between human and robot.
Right.
Do you think the specific roles might have influenced the trust dynamics as well?
It's certainly possible. You know, the navigator role, especially in a search and rescue scenario, carries a lot of responsibility.
Right.
The team is relying on them for crucial information to make informed decisions.
Yeah.
So the inherent trust humans have for other humans in those high-pressure situations might have amplified that preference for a human navigator,
Right.
even a fallible one.
Right, because you're putting your life in their hands.
Exactly.
But the study wasn't only looking at trust.
No.
They also measured things like situation awareness, fatigue, and workload across the different conditions.
They did.
What did they find there?
Well, when it came to situation awareness,
Right.
which is basically how well the team understood what was happening around them,
Got it.
it was actually lower in the teams with robots.
Even the reliable ones.
Even the reliable ones.
That's kind of counterintuitive.
It is.
You would think having a robot that's supposed to be good at navigation
Right.
would improve the team's awareness, not hinder it.
You would think so, but
Yeah.
the researchers suggest that the human team members might have been over-relying on the robot,
Interesting.
paying less attention to their surroundings,
Okay.
and maybe even missing crucial details
Right.
because they were assuming the robot had everything covered.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
It is.
The robot can provide valuable information,
Yes.
but it can also lead to a kind of tunnel vision if we're not careful.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
And when it came to fatigue,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps unsurprisingly,
Mm-hmm.
it was significantly higher when working with the unreliable robot.
Makes sense.
Constantly having to adapt to its errors took a mental toll on the human team members.
It did.
Makes sense if you're always second-guessing your teammate.
Yeah,
It's bound to be more tiring than working with someone you can completely rely on.
totally.
What about workload? You'd think that having to compensate for an unreliable robot would increase the overall workload for the human team members.
You would, but interestingly, workload didn't actually change significantly across the different conditions.
Oh, wow.
It suggests that the increased fatigue wasn't necessarily about having more work to do,
No.
but about the type of mental effort required, having to constantly monitor and adjust for the robot's inconsistencies was mentally taxing,
Right.
even if the overall task load remained the same.
So it's not just about how much our brains are working, but how they're working.
Exactly. And this highlights an important consideration as we integrate robots into more team environments.
Yeah.
We need to think about the cognitive load we're placing on human team members, not just the physical tasks we're asking them to perform.
And of course, no study is perfect.
Of course not. not.
What were some of the limitations of this particular research?
Well, one of the main limitations is that it was conducted in a virtual environment,
Got it.
which is great for control and consistency,
Right.
but it doesn't perfectly capture the complexities and nuances of a real-world search and rescue mission. Things like weather conditions, unpredictable terrain, and the emotional stress of dealing with a real emergency are hard to simulate accurately.
Plus, the participants were university students, not seasoned first responders.
Right.
So their responses and behaviors might not be fully representative of how experienced professionals would react to those situations.
Exactly. So while this study provides some fascinating insights into trust dynamics in multi-human robot teams,
Okay.
more research is needed, especially in real-world settings with expert participants, to fully understand these complex interactions.
Absolutely. But even with those limitations, the findings are really thought-provoking.
They are?
They challenge our assumptions about how trust works in teams. And they raise some important questions about the future of human-robot collaboration.
Questions that extend far beyond the realm of search and rescue.
Right.
We're seeing robots integrated into more and more domains, from healthcare and manufacturing to transportation and even creative fields.
Right. And as we move towards a future where humans and robots are working more closely together, understanding these trust dynamics is going to be crucial.
Absolutely. And that understanding needs to be multifaceted.
Okay.
It's not just about making robots more reliable or giving them human-like features.
Right.
It's about recognizing the inherent differences between humans and machines and designing systems that optimize for both.